What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. I'm going to continue to examine 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. And Curtis Anderson and myself took a look at Oakland Billy Smith. He would reside out of Atlantic City, New Jersey. But he would fight the majority of his career in California. And you can find Oakland Billy Smith at the Olympic Auditorium in California. Now, the Olympic Auditorium was the mecca of boxing in California, as was New York Madison Square Garden, the mecca of Manhattan. Billy Smith was born in 1921 in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he would have his first professional debut July 9th, 1941. He would lose his first fight in 4 rounds to Frank Org. He would have 9 fights that year. He would have 1 knockout. And he said, I might have something here. So he would continue. He would have 12 fights in 1942. And he would jump right into the line of fire by taking on Little Tiger Aaron Wade, a member of Black Murderers Row, who had 2 losses and 1 win over Little Tiger Aaron Wade. Now, Little Tiger Aaron Wade was a very, very good fighter. He would crack the ribs of Archie Moore. He could punch. But then in 1943, Billy Smith would enlist in the U.S. Army. And then he would come out in 1944, July 19th, and take on Leroy Wade in Oakland, California. He would defeat him in 6 rounds. And he would do well that year, just suffering 1 loss to Jack Chase, Little Joe Louis, San Francisco, California. He would lose to him in 10 rounds. But then he would take on Bob Smith, and he would defeat him in California, San Francisco. November 24th, he would take on Coco Kid, San Francisco. He would have a 3-round no contest. 1945, he would take on Jack Chase, Oakland, California, and he would defeat him in 10 rounds. But then he would take on Newsboy Mitchell twice, March 14th and April 11th. He would lose 1 and win 1 to Newsboy Mitchell. He would take on Roy Miller, who was a very good club fighter during those years. Fought on May 7th of 1945, San Francisco, California, and he would defeat him in 10 rounds. But then he would get an opportunity of a lifetime, May 31st, 1945, and he would knock out in 11 rounds Watson Jones for the California Light Heavyweight Championship belt. What an opportunity that was for Oakland Billy Smith. But then Oakland Billy Smith would fight fighters such as Charlie Billy. And he did very good. He held his own against Charlie Billy. Charlie Billy was from Pittsburgh. He was one of the most avoided fighters in boxing history. But Oakland Billy Smith would come up short with Charlie Billy. He would lose to him in 10 rounds, October 8th of 1945. They fought in Oakland, California. But then in 1946, January 15th to be exact, he would get in the ring with Buddy Millard, Los Angeles, California, and he would knock him out in 4 rounds. And then he would face another Black Murderers Row, and I consider him a Black Murderers Row member. And that's Jimmy Bivens. Fought him January 29th in Oakland, California, and he would come up short in 10 rounds to Jimmy Bivens. And he would knock out Lloyd Marshall, March 20th of 1946. He would lose to Charlie Burley once again. And he would knock out Watson Jones again. What a fighter was Oakland Billy Smith. He would face Ezard Charles. He would lose to Ezard Charles. Then he would take on Archie Moore. And he would have a 12-round draw with Archie Moore. What else can I say about Oakland Billy Smith? He was in there with the best. Losing to Burt Littell and defeating Bob Farquharth was another good fighter. He would lose to Archie Moore once again. What a fighter was Oakland Billy Smith. Curtis and I decided to add Oakland Billy Smith to the list of 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. Shout out to Oakland Billy Smith. What a fighter he was. What was most amazing to me by Oakland Billy Smith. He would knock out Harold Johnson, who would be a future light heavyweight champion of the world. Jimmy Carter, lightweight champion of the world. Jimmy Carter, to this day, will be the only 3-time lightweight champion in boxing history. Now, he would knock out Ike Williams in 1951 in 14 rounds. He would lose his title to Patty DeMarco, regain it, and then lose his title to Laura Solis and regain it. What a fighter was Jimmy Carter. He was very good friends with my grandfather. I often told the story about Jimmy Carter dating a girl by the name of Lulu Bell. And that was a real story. Jimmy Carter was a very, very good fighter. Very smooth. Had a little bit of Joe Louis in him in terms of his ability to shuffle a little bit and jab, come back with the 1-2. He was born December 15th, 1923. In Aiken, South Carolina. He stood 5'6.5" and he was a very strong young man. Would have one loss in 1946, and he would continue with the KO string, taking on fighters such as Walter Keane and Eddie White, Sandy Sadler, which he would have a draw with. He would take on Dave Williams twice that year. 1948, he'd be in the ring with Phil Burden and Julian Copeland. In 1949, he would take on Harold Jones, January 17th in New York. He would defeat him in 10 rounds. He would take on Archie Whitewater, San Francisco, California, knocking him out in 6 rounds. November 29th, 1949, he would take on Rudy Cruz in Los Angeles, California. And he would lose to him in 10 rounds. But in 1950, March 28th to be exact, he'd be in the ring with Wallace Bud Smith in Cincinnati, and he would defeat him in 10 rounds. Now, Wallace Bud Smith would eventually defeat Jimmy Carter, and Bud Smith would wind up becoming a lightweight champion of the world. He was from Cincinnati, Ohio. 1951, May 25th to be exact, he'd be in the ring with Ike Williams in New York City, and he would knock out Ike Williams in 14 rounds to become the lightweight champion of the world. What an accomplishment that would be. And an upset, because Ike Williams was the man in the lightweight division. No one can seem to defeat or solve the puzzle of Ike Williams. He could punch. He was from Trenton, New Jersey. And Jimmy Carter would hold a knockout in 4 rounds over Ike Williams. 1952, he would take on Teddy Red Top Davis in New York, defeat him in 8 rounds. He would take on James Montgomery, defeating him in 8 rounds. 1953, March 10th, he would take on Johnny Saxton, and it would be a 10-round draw. Now, Johnny Saxton was from Newark, New Jersey. He would eventually become a welterweight champion of the world. Now, Jimmy Carter would also take on Orlando Zulueta from Cuba. Fought on March 23rd and May 5th of 1953. Fought him in Brooklyn and Cincinnati. Lost to him in 10, and he defeated him in 10 rounds. He would take on Johnny Williams in New York, knocking him out. Carl Coates and Arthur King. He would face Orlando Zulueta once again, December 11th, 1953 in New York. But in 1954, he'd be stopped in 5 rounds by Joe Miceli, February 20th to be exact, in Cincinnati. He would take on Johnny Gonzalez. Joe Miceli once again, he would lose to him in 10 rounds. He'd be in the ring with Arthur Pursley and knock him out in 9 rounds in 1954. But 1955, Jimmy Carter would lose a split decision and lose his world lightweight championship of the world. Jimmy Carter was an outstanding fighter. And the thing I can say about him, and I met him personally, nice guy, very, very nice guy, friends with my dad and my grandfather, that if he shook your hand and told you he was going to do something, he meant it. And he was another fighter that would come in Stillman's gym with a three-piece suit, fedora hat, a handkerchief, shiny shoes, and a pocket watch, where you could see the chain hanging from the pocket to the clip of his belt line. Shout out to Jimmy Carter. He's been added to a list of 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. Ike Williams, born August 2nd, 1923, Brunswick, Georgia. He stood 5'9.5" and he could punch. He would become the world lightweight champion 1945 when he would knock out Juan Zarita, Mexico City. And he would knock him out in 2 rounds. Ike Williams couldn't celebrate his victory in the ring. See, he'd be chased out of that arena. He'd be hit with half-eaten sandwiches and bottles of beer because he was not welcomed in Mexico City after he knocked out their hero and champion, Juan Zarita. But Ike Williams would be in the ring with Doug Carter out of Camden, 1948. He would defeat him in 10 rounds. He would defeat Tony Pallone, December 12th, 1947, New York's Madison Square Garden. He would take on Enrique Bolanos, May 25th, 1948. He was in defense of his world lightweight championship belt. July 12th, 1948. He would take on Bo Jack, Philadelphia, knocking him out in 6 rounds. And that was one of the most savage knockouts of all times. Bo Jack would be hit with 42 unanswered punches, body and head. And Ike Williams would beat him half to death because he didn't appreciate not being welcome in Philadelphia. You see, in 1947, he would take on Bob Montgomery. And although he defeated Bob Montgomery, but the commissioner in Philadelphia didn't recognize Ike Williams because he was not a Philadelphian. Bob Montgomery was. So Bo Jack was appreciated in Philadelphia. And Ike Williams wanted to show that he was a Philadelphia somewhat fighter, if you will. And when he got Bo Jack in that ring, Bo Jack hit him with a bolo punch that uplifted the root of Ike Williams' tooth. And all hell broke loose in the beginning of the first round. But in the 6th round was when Ike Williams would do Bo Jack in. So Ike Williams must be selected 100 years, 150 greatest black fighters of all times. He would end his career with a record of 154 total bouts, 60 knockouts. He would lose 18 fights and be stopped 6 times. Shout out to Ike Williams. This is Scrapbook Boxing. And Curtis Anderson saying all great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on this channel. Thanks for watching. 100 years. 150 greatest black fighters of all times. Shout out to Ike Williams.